February the 16th to order.
It's the back side of the first page. It'll give a very broad overview of the CAPERS agency budget, and if you dig further in the document, there'll be more detail as you go on. So I'll keep my remarks fairly brief. So the first couple of pages. The important thing to note about the CAPERS budget is that the budget you see reflected here refers to the agency's operations. It doesn't reflect the costs and expenses and investments of the CAPERS system as a whole. You won't see those numbers reflected in the budget here. The numbers that are reflected here are what it costs CAPERS as an agency to administer over the system. So as a general note, the agency is funded by investment income, employer contributions, and member contributions. State General Fund doesn't touch this agency, so you'll see a 0 across the line for the State General Fund line. So I'll jump directly into fiscal year 22. You can find this on 359, or if you'd like some more details, you can find sort of an itemized breakdown on 363. So for fiscal year 22, the agency requests about 63.1 million in expenditures and 98.4 FTE positions. This is a bit higher than what the legislature approved last year, about 2.6 million higher. And this increase is primarily due to investment management expenses. These are fees that investment managers are paid as based on performance of the investment portfolio managed. As the portfolio does better, the investment management fees go up. So when the agency submits its budget, it assumes a 7.75 rate of return, and it builds its budget around that. For fiscal year 21, the system's total return was 26.3%, a bit higher than the 7.7% assumed rate. So accordingly, you'll see a bit of an increase in investment management fees. That's generally reflective of how the portfolio is doing. For fiscal year 22, the government doesn't recommend any changes to the agency's request. For fiscal year 23, you'll see this summarized on the bottom of page 359, or if you'd like an itemized breakdown, you'll see that on page 365. For fiscal year 23, the agency requests about 67.7 million in expenditures and 98.4 FTE positions. This is, again, a bit higher than the previous year, about 4.6 million higher. This increase is primarily due to a couple things. The first is an increase in investment management expenses, those fees I mentioned for the previous fiscal year. There's also an increase for the modernization of the pension administration system. The CAPERS agency has been in the process of updating and modernizing its pension administration system, and we're about in the middle of that. You can see details of that on page 366. There'll be a gray box that sort of summarizes how we got here and what the next couple of years look like in terms of expenditures and plans. So in general, we can expect expenditures totaling about 6.6 million in 22, about 9.2 million in fiscal year 23, and about 9 million for fiscal years 24 and 25 as the agency ramps up the modernization of the system. And then in 26, we'll see that cost taper down. So that concludes my remarks for the CAPERS agency budget at a pretty high level. Would be happy to jump into any part of that. Would also be happy to defer to Director Conroy to answer any specific questions as well.
Stephen, thank you very much. Committee, are there any questions of Stephen? Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Stephen, on page 365, it says all other adjustments, and there's a increased travel subsistence costs for staff travel, and they're saying it's because of the COVID-19 pandemic is over. Now they're going to travel more. What was that prior to the COVID?
So
did it drop?
Yeah, so the agency lowered travel at the height of the pandemic, and we're returning back to normal levels. So you'll see a bit of an increase.
Okay, thank you.
Committee, are there additional questions for Stephen? Seeing none. Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Conroy, welcome. Would you like to add a few comments about your budget?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to be here and talk about maybe a little different aspect of CAPERS in terms of the operating budget. And as Stephen has certainly explained well, I mean, this is just the operating side, no general fund. All of the expenses come out of the three trust funds, the big one, the CAPERS Retirement System Fund. There's a trust fund for the deferred comp program, which is an optional deferred comp program. State employees and those other local employers that want to participate in it can, and there's about 400 of those, and all that comes from fees that the employees pay to participate in that optional group plan. And then the third one, a smaller one, is a death and disability trust fund, and that's all paid by employers. And just to remind you, just kind of the complexity of the CAPERS system, over 300,000 members, over 1,500 employers, so lots of information and dollars going back and forth between as employers gather employee contribution and employer contributions as those employers, and send that to CAPERS as those employers gather participating service credit and enrollment, and as when people leave, all that information's going back and forth. And then, of course, once the members get to retirement, sending out those, helping them with retirement applications and so forth, and then the actual retirement benefit payments going out. So just an operation that size, we have over 100,000 phone calls a year, about 24,000 emails, about 32,000 new or transferring members, so all that enrollment process, and then a little less than about 6,000 people actually retire each year. And so we send out then about $1.9 billion a year that goes out to pay those retirement benefits, death benefits, and also withdrawals. And of course, at the bottom of my testimony, and again, no general fund, and it all comes out of the trust fund. And as you all know, the IRS, once the money gets in the trust fund, it only can be used to pay those entitled benefits and then the administration of the system. Just in terms of revenue into that trust fund, just to remind you, over half comes from investment earnings, about a third from those employer contributions, and the balance from employee contributions. And again, I can't pass up the opportunity to remind you one more time that fiscal year 2021 return was 26.3%. And I wish we could do that every year, but of course we're not, but it does help with the overall funding system of the system. And you may remember the current assumed rate is 7.75. As Stephen has also mentioned there in kind of the middle of page 2, that first bullet point, we're sending out that money, that $2.2 billion in 23 estimated is outside. It's one of those off-budget items because the money's already been accounted for, and Stephen can explain the magic of off-budget processes, but it's really kind of outside of this budget document for a variety of reasons. And then the investment-related expenses, and of course, that's tied to that assumed rate of return right now. Those fees that we pay our investment managers, and it's all externally managed, it's 0.148%. So I think pretty on the low side, and I guess a lot of that's just the economy of scale, of course, when you have $26 billion to manage and invest. Those fund managers give us, of course, very, very competitive rates. And so those fees for investment managers, that investment management, is about $39 million in the current year, a little over $41 million in the budget year. And it goes up in the budget year. We assume it's going to grow that 7.75. So that means as income goes up, fees to the managers also go up. The administration program does go from $22.6 million to $25 million, and most of that is around the IT modernization project that Stephen has mentioned as well. Page 3 just kind of goes through that system, but just kind of recap, this is really the third year coming to the legislature. There was $6 million, $6.6 million approved last year, a little around $1 million approved the year of that. So this is our third year into the system. We're replacing a system that started in 2005. So in terms of IT systems, it's kind of long of tooth, as they say. And the one thing that's really been challenging through the years, of course, are the changes, statutory changes that have been modifications to the retirement system, which then translates into change in the IT system to accommodate those changes. And for example, over this time period, KPERS 2 was created in 2009. KPERS 3 was created in 2012. It actually went in effect in 2015. And working after retirement and on down the list. And so every time the legislature makes a change, the system has to be modified to specifically accommodate KPERS. We're working with an outside vendor, and there's the base system, which is probably about 80% kind of the generic pension administration system, but it's the cost comes on that other 20% customization for all the legislative changes. And so our current system is working. I mean, it's doing the base things that you want. We're getting in contributions. We're paying out benefits. We're keeping track of the member information. But each year, and particularly as there's more changes, there's continuing challenges to the system's just kind of clunky and is not as efficient as we would want. So anyway, there's several more years on the project, but I think in the long term, this will position the IT system within KPERS to continue to serve our employers and members for quite a number of years after that. The last page, attachment A, just summarizes, and of course you've got Stephen's summary as well. But so certainly the budget's going up, but it's mainly investment fees. And of course, in this case, that's a good thing because that means that we're anticipating investment income's going up. And then the second part is the modernization project, which in the current approved budget is $6.6 million. And then in the budget year, it goes to a little over $9 million. So, but certainly be glad to respond to any questions.
Well, thank you very much. Committee, are there questions? Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy, for being here and testifying. Always appreciate what you do for the KPERS system. I'm focused a little bit on the Sagitech project, not because there's anything wrong with it. And I understood last year the modernization, $6 million, 6.6 is obviously a lot of money, $9 more million, and then another 9 perhaps in 2024. That's a big project. Obviously, it's almost 24 million. And we look at projects like the unemployment modernization that we've gone through. We had an oversight committee that looked pretty deeply into a similar type of spend, albeit in a different area, but they had similar problems in terms of having to upgrade for different changes based on the unemployment benefits. I'm just a little bit like, I look at this and I see that we've had this vendor, and they're probably a great vendor in terms of 17 years. We've customized the system quite heavily, and sometimes we have to look at other architecture. Sometimes it might be easier to modify and upgrade and change. And I'm hoping that we looked at that when you decided to engage with them further, because there are other platforms out there that we could be looking at for the state level that, where we're leveraging it for unemployment, for the Department of Commerce and for other systems. Perhaps we could leverage similar technologies and architect something at a lower, more efficient cost, but also be more extensible. So I'm just a little concerned by that. I know that we probably didn't sole source this. You probably looked around, right?
Yeah, we did bring in a consultant, another company, Siegel, specializes in pension systems and does a lot of national work, and they provide us a lot of input. But
yeah. Well, I'm just making those comments. I think that we in the state we can do a little better in terms of our IT spend. It's not something that I'm faulting your organization with. It's the same thing happening over and over again across our agencies, and it's something that we should be consolidating and looking at holistically. But thanks for your testimony.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, and that's right. I mean, I think if one thing, well, one of the things that might keep me up at night is in particular seeing all the difficulties in the unemployment system. And of course, you know, a lot of those unemployment recipients were rightfully upset, but I'd hate to have 100,000 cranky retirees if there was some IT glitch and they didn't get their entitled and promised benefits. So we want to stay ahead of that, and that's right. I think our consultant said there's, in terms of a complexity and the size of our system, there's, of course, maybe, and you heard some of that maybe in labor or the unemployment, there's probably really only about 4 national pension firms that specialize in pension systems that could handle a system, I guess, like us. But again, we're very cognizant of trying to keep that no-code, low-code as we go forward. And again, that split, we hope to keep it in that about 80 to 20% if we're successful. But good comments, and I appreciate your comments very much.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Conroy. Did you guys apply for any Sparks money? You'd like to pay off this $9 million, these 2 numbers I heard here for 2024? Was there any conversation about that?
We did not, and I guess we did not, I guess is the short answer. We did some preliminary looking, but anyway, we did not pursue that.
Okay. Well, today's the deadline. And they're easy applications, and this would be a great place to because we're going to spend it anyway. So, thank you.
Committee, any additional questions for Mr. Conroy? Thank you, Alan. Committee, is there a recommendation to the Budget Committee on this budget? Senator Fagg?
So you ready for, okay. I move that we move out, we're ready to move out of committee then, okay. I move that we, as a committee, approve the governor's recommendation for FY '22 and '23 favorably.
Is there a second? Olson seconds, Fagg moves. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, committee, we will now turn our attention to a hearing on Senate Bill 399. Eileen, can you give us an overview, please?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee. Senate Bill 399 adds maternity centers to the definition of healthcare provider for purposes of the Healthcare Insurance Provider Availability Act. So it amends KSA 40-3401, which is the definition statute of the Healthcare Provider Insurance Availability Act. And simply put, the bill just inserts inserts maternity center into the definition and states that healthcare provider will include a maternity center as defined in KSA 65-503 and amendments thereto. And the bill would become effective upon publication in the statute book. I will make one note, though. In the title of the bill, should the committee choose to move favorably upon this bill, I need to make a technical amendment to the title. Apparently, I was dyslexic when I was thinking, and the second portion of the title where it says relating to the Healthcare Insurance Provider Availability Act, I need to swap insurance and provider. So it would read insurance provider, Healthcare Provider Insurance Availability Act. I'm dyslexic when I'm speaking, too. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Eileen. Committee, are there questions?
What?
I see no questions. Thank you. We will now turn our attention to proponent testimony. We have Kendra Wyatt, who is the CEO and co-founder of New Birth Company of Overland Park. Welcome, Kendra.
Thank you, Chairman, and my apologies to Suzanne and everyone for the delay this morning, to the last minute nature of us showing up. Thank you so much for your time and considering Senate Bill 399. This is truly a technical adoption of a definition. Maternity centers, if you do want to reference the levels of maternity care table, are recognized by ACOG, American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, as a primary basic level of care for low-risk women. And here in Kansas, we actually have a very long history of maternity centers, and that is part of the reason why we need this technical fix, is that we have historically been included in the child care facilities. And that happens to go back to the fact that women used to adopt out their babies. So literally 100 years, and it's just continued to sit there. So this is very much a technical fix in terms of being able to access the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. It is not a mandate, and it would also say a qualified licensee, so it's not something to be taken lightly. Just in the past 6 months, we've been on a journey since having to close our location in Kansas City, Kansas. First by going to the Bob Bethel Oversight Committee and discussing the cost of malpractice and how that prevents us from seeing more Medicaid moms. And then being directed to Marvin Kleb's Healthcare Stabilization Fund Committee. So we were able to discuss this at length and have good conversation. Some of the members here are also members of that committee. At that time, I'll just mention that the Kansas Medical Association did comment that this was consistent with the corporate statute of medicine law that was already on the books. And with that, I just want to say thanks again to those who have been involved in this, and Kathy Gordon, who has been working with some of you and is a member of the Board of Healing Arts Nurse Midwifery Council and has provided some extra expert testimony and advice. So with that, I'm asking that the committee please move forward on this. I will mention just in reference that you do have very much a technical support letter from Rebecca Williams with Hub Insurance as being an expert in the insurance industry with knowledge of carriers and access to malpractice regarding this space. And I'll end and stand for questions.
Thank you, Kendra. Committee, are there questions? Senator Pittman?
This sounds like a good thing to do, but what's the bad thing that happens when we continue not to take action on this? Do we put mothers at risk?
Yes. So the number one bad thing that already has happened, which was a tragedy, is I was forced to close our Kansas City, Kansas location. And that is located in zip code 66102, which is one of the worst mother-infant mortality zip codes we have in the state of Kansas. If we don't move forward on this, it puts the ability for certainly me to continue to run and operate the licensed birth center we have in Overland Park as well.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Committee, are there additional questions? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. The Department of Insurance, did you visit with them about this, or how do they have a stance on this?
I did, and that was during the summer and actually prior to July 1. We worked like mad to try to find a fix, to try to find other options. And at the time, I would say this would be a potential follow-up topic. At the time, what we found is that the regulatory environment that we have in the state of Kansas did not allow a couple of carriers who were interested in serving us from the private sector, but did not allow them to be a carrier in the state of Kansas. And that has to do with the contemporary nature of obstetric malpractice and the idea of basing everything on bonds versus having the flexibility as a company. So for example, AIG is a Warren Buffett company. And so they very bluntly say, you know, they're able to fulfill their malpractice obligations because of Nebraska Furniture Mart. That's not how the insurance industry in Kansas is regulated today. So that would be an opportunity.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all your work that you've done for women and families that are seeking a lower priced option, natural birth for their child. Yet, could you explain if a family woman comes to you and maybe there's some complications with birth?
Sure, sure. And I will just ask everybody to go ahead and come back to this diagram regarding levels of maternity care. One of the things that makes Kansas an exemplary birth center state is we have good regulations and we have a great relationship with KDHE regarding our transfer requirements. So we actually have inside the regulations some never events, some things. So from the very get-go, we are not able to serve high-risk women. And in fact, you might colloquially think of a pregnant mother in terms of risk of 1, 2, and 3. We're never going to see the 2s or 3s, or if we do, we make sure they're referred to the right level of care immediately. And then addition to that, as we see moms throughout their pregnancies, we're constantly reassessing that risk. And if we see something for her to go to the hospital in a normal manner, that would be our #1 goal. And then we do have transfer arrangements. That's part of our licensure with KDHE, that we have listed transfer agreements for both NICU and maternity levels of care. And I think you will see more discussion regarding maternity level of care conversations in terms of improving maternal outcomes. So those are all things that we do have on place and are required for all birth centers.
And just a quick follow-up. So, Will, I know that you had, the difficulty was trying to find an insurance carrier that would give you it's not insurance for your employees or anything like that. Will this bill help with the problem that you had in the state so that you could take young mothers on Medicaid?
Yeah. So let me separate the two issues. I cannot own a birth center. As a highly qualified person with 20 years of experience, I cannot, that's not true. I can own the birth center, I cannot obtain facility malpractice without the maternity center being listed as a healthcare stabilization fund defined provider. And so there is a direct connection, and there has been a poor outcome of this, is that it's about money and it's about our ability to increase the number of Medicaid mothers that we are able to take in Overland Park, and that that number declined as a result of this, because that availability plan insurance is more expensive than the standard market.
So this malpractice insurance, the first step would be this bill.
We can't do anything without the definition. And even if there are other things done with the definition of maternity centers, the revisers did advise separate these topics, get the insurance topic clean, and then what we do with perhaps cleaning up childcare and facilities, we can do as part of a different bill.
Terrific. I support this. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Committee, are there additional questions? I see none. Thank you very much. And Kendra, help me. We also have testimony from Kayla Lawrence, which I assume is written only.
Yes. So she is, so I'll just comment on Kayla's testimony. Kayla Lawrence is our clinical director, certified nurse midwife, and again, she holds her license with the Board of Healing Arts as a certified nurse midwife, independent midwife. And I think what I would share here is that Kayla and I literally made at one of those 11:59 p.m. decisions that we were not going to allow the birth center to close. And so she took on the burden so that we could continue and appropriately use the healthcare stabilization fund, continue into having malpractice. And she did that with the faith that we would fix it. So that is the nature of her testimony. She's saying, hey, can we fix this so that she can go back to her job, which is providing midwifery and helping the team be successful, and allow me to take that burden back.
Thank you very much. Committee, I will note, as Kendra indicated, there is written testimony from Rebecca Williams, who is an account executive shareholder for HUB. Is there any additional proponents to this bill? Is there anyone that wishes to testify neutral to this bill? Is there any opposition to the bill? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 399. Committee, it is my intention, regardless of the weatherman at this point, to meet tomorrow, but stay tuned. I don't control the weather, and I don't know what leadership's going to do to us. So unfortunately, we do have 4 bills or 5 bills that have to get worked either tomorrow, Friday, or Monday, and my preference would be tomorrow. And so stay tuned. We'll be in touch. Senator Kluse, do you have some guests here today?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have a couple of guests in the back, pages. From Topeka, Carla is from Topeka High, if you can wave your hand there, and Noah from Faith Temple. So thanks for joining us today.
Welcome. Glad you're here. Is there any other business that we need to work on today? Seeing none, we're adjourned.